Staistvo, 5,500 to 4,000 years before Christ. The age of Staistvo has its own special features and a way of life. It is also the oldest stage from which we have reliable data on the life, development and movement of human communities. The first settlements were built using banks of rivers with 200 or 600 inhabitants. Livestock was very developed, and with the improvement of farming, settlements were built in plains, usually on a light land. The discovery of agriculture entailed the establishment of man on land, and it was the greatest turning point in history, says Piran. The Danube region is the most fertile and most suitable for agriculture, and it consists primarily of river valleys: Danube, Tisa, Morava, Drava, Sava and Prut. It is generally believed that agriculture began in the Middle East around 6,000 years before Christ, but according to the development of Danube, that time can be moved by 1 or 2,000 years in advance. Some of the modern discoveries prove us that the Proto-Serbs in the Danube region had a time advantage in conquering and processing of copper and bronze more than 2,000 years before Mesopotamia. In that age, in addition to farming, households and handcrafts, they are gaining a more prominent role where more and more attention is paid to preparing food and making clothes. The construction of stables, the production of necessary tools and clothes are the first handcrafts. They crossed the rivers on vessels in form of rafts, tying several trees, and they made the first boats out of old crumpled logs. The material for making weapons, tools, and various tools was first stone and bone, and then copper and bronze. It was previously thought that metal processing had not yet been conquered at that time of the stalemate, in a time of Staistvo, but it is now reliably known that the Proto-Serbs used bronze axes at that time. One such axe was found near the main from the glacier in the Alps. For comparison, bronze came into Mesopotamia shortly before 3,000 years before Christ, meaning 2,000 years later. The Danubian Proto-Serbs made great progress in the production of pottery, which became handcraft and woodworking. In addition to ordinary axes, there was also testle and bredve. The Egyptians at that time knew only about an ordinary axe. Among the pre-Serbs in the Danubian region, we find traces of the first beliefs related to natural phenomena during the time. There are also traces of the first temples and of first relics. There are traces of belief in the gods of sun, sky, earth and fertility, and corresponding idols. The earth was personified in a form of mother goddess. All these beliefs are present in later Serbian mythology. The main sites from that time of settlement are Lepenski Vir, Starčevo, Kereš and Karanovo. It was a distinct farming culture that spread across the Helm, Balkan peninsula, from the Danube to Thessaly and from Epirus to Bulgaria. North of that Danube, it spread across the Tisa and Kereš valleys to Transylvania and east to Carpathians, according to the sources of Seret and Prut and the most curse of Dniester. One of the greatest achievements of Staistvo is the appearance of the first literacy, but not in a modern sense of the word. At first, artisans used various patterns to decorate or mark their weapons or tools. Repeated selection of patterns and their shaping led to repetition of same signs that began to indicate something special. This led to a number of characters and the first letter that could be used to express certain terms. At the end of the Staistvo, the Proto-Serbs used a number of signs for specific purposes. In order to express an idea, in addition to a certain sign with a fixed meaning, they also drew an object to which something refers. This is how the first painting appeared. Piren believes that literacy was first symbolic, then pictorial, and later switched to syllabic writing. This accurately established the origin and development of literacy in general and Serbian literacy in general, which is confirmed by the foundings in Danubian region, Troy and Crete. Kai Birket-Smith, probably insufficiently acquainted with the beginnings of literacy in the Danubian region, says that the first letter in the world was found in Sumeria on clay tablets from the time of Uruk, 4000 before Christ, and that it was about 1500 characters. The Sumerians later made a cuneiform script based on mentioned signs. In this case, too, we can make comparisons between Mesopotamia and Danubian region. While the Sumerians had a sign alphabet of 1500 characters, the Serbs had a perfect alphabet of around 30 letters, the so-called Vinčan alphabet. The main finds of that old letter are Vinča, Starčevo, Tartarija, Tordoš, Karanovo, Gradešnica, Banjica, Sitova, Troj, Crete, and Phoenicia. The syllabus of about 90 characters came directly from the ideography, with the syllabic sign being read as the initial syllable of ideography. Each letter had a vowel value of one letter. Cuneiform from the Middle East is in fact syllabic. In Danubian literacy, the syllable changes to letters, that is, the alphabet. Several syllabic signs can be found in Russian and Bulgarian alphabets as well as they were in Serbian until Vuk Karadzic's reform. We can confidently say that the Danubian Proto-Serbs from the time of Stajstvo laid a solid foundation for Serbian and European literacy. It is also indisputable that the Danubian culture covered the whole of Europe, West Asia, and North Africa. Towards the end of Stajstvo, new factors appear in Danubian culture which will cause a great spread of Danubians throughout Europe and Asia Minor. Imetstvo, 4000 to 2000 years before Christ. The time period of Imetstvo lasted from 4000 to 2000 years before Christ. In fact, the movements of people from the Danubian region caused by the degree of development in Stajstvo did not calm down until Nino's campaign. Nino's campaign can be considered as the final achievement of Serbian expansion from the Danubian region, but it is in many ways different from previous movements. The time of Imetstvo differs from previous state in everything, both in main features of human life and in way of agriculture, handcraft production, but also human understandings. It is a time of creating special estates and households in order to create property. With the development of the main economic branches, man was enabled for a new way of life, and no longer he depended on tribes and communities. The transition from the original community to tribe as a broader framework was made at the time of Stajstvo. The new way of life enabled a large increase in population, so that the settlements from Stajstvo became too small and previous land insufficient and exhausted. The demand for new fertile areas is becoming a general phenomenon that leads to the abandonment of stable settlements and the spread from the Danubian region in all directions. The choice of place for the creation of a new settlement no longer depended on river valleys, nor was it conditioned as before. The Serbs discovered that the land bears the best fruits when some forested area is burned by burning the forest. Burned surfaces show fatigue after a few years. The ancient Serbs left these areas on deposit and conquered new ones. Child says about the Danubian people from the time of Starčevo that they were engaged in arable farming, hunting and fishing. They burned forests and shrub areas, sowed cereals, mostly wheat, and then changed the place of crops every year. The new estates looked like dachas or farms, and most often consisted of lonely hut and a barn built between or next to a field.